Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Covert, and I'm with Symphoria. And I'm so excited to be bringing you today a collaboration with Symphoria and the Q Center. We have our guest artist this week, Sara Davis Buechner, who is here to have a Q&A with our Q Center representative and spokesperson, Alex Hawthorne. And I just feel like this is going to be a wonderful time of sharing and of getting to know each other. So I wanted to tell all of you a little bit about Sara in case you aren't familiar with who she is. Sara Davis Buechner is a wonderful and world-renowned pianist, and she will be our guest artist with Symphoria the week of our Masterworks concert, which is October 24th. She is also a professor of music at Temple University in Philadelphia, and she has won many prizes at international competitions and has also played all over the world. And we are so thrilled to have you here, Sara. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you so much. That's a very, very lovely intro. It's really nice to be here.
And we also have Hillary Avalone here from the Q Center. She is the regional director of the Q Center. And Hillary, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about the Q Center?
Sure. So the Q Center is an LGBTQ youth program that works with LGBTQ youth and their families ages 5 to 29. And we offer support group programming, education, and sort of building community in our 9-county area. So we've been around for a very long time, and we have seen a lot of faces come through our program. And I'm really excited to do this collaboration with you all.
Wonderful. And we're so excited to be doing this too. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Alex Hawthorne, who is our Q Center spokesperson. And Alex is a 16-year-old 10th grader who lives in Watertown, New York, and is currently attending Watertown High School. In his free time, he loves hanging with his pet guinea pig, creating art, and listening to music. And I am sure that the two of you are going to have so much in common. So Alex will be sharing his own questions as well as questions from other Q Center participants. And Alex, why don't you just take it away? What would you like to know from Sara?
Hi, Sara. So the first question is, looking at your website and the research I've done, it seems that you have a big presence in Asia. Do you see a difference in the attitude of the U.S. versus Asian cultures when it comes to gender acceptance?
I do. That's you start with a huge question, so I'll probably come up with a huge answer for you. I'll do my best. So I have to backtrack a long, long way back to when I was your age, and I'm not going to say how many years ago that was, but probably more than 5, you can guess. When I was in high school, my piano teacher was a Filipino virtuoso. His name was Ronaldo Reyes. He was a great pianist and a wonderful teacher, and in many ways was sort of my de facto father. And his appetite for cosmopolitan things, he spoke about 8 languages, he read everything, he was just a brilliant man and a great artist, inspired me tremendously. And he, of course, traveled a lot in Asia, and he made the feeling of the Pacific seem very, very big to me. I was a kid growing up in the suburbs of Baltimore, so for me, places that he went, like Tokyo and Manila and Sydney, seemed like on another planet or whatever. But I think I acquired a certain wanderlust about that. And later in life, it was basically during my period of transition, I studied a lot of Japanese. I was a little bit gainfully unemployed at the time, so I had some time. So I enrolled in some Japanese classes in New York and studied Japanese. And around that same time, I met my spouse, who was Japanese. So Japan has played a very large part in my life. And I'm quite fond of Japanese culture. I have many Japanese friends and have traveled there and played there a lot. But I've done a lot of playing in Korea, China, Philippines, Thailand also. I do love traveling in that part of the world. I find the cultures are, of course, fascinating. They're rich. The history is incredible. The history of the characters that populate the languages of all these countries is something I sometimes wish I could just give up the music and just study the languages. Myself would be quite something. So I feel like that's been something that has graced my life since I was very young. It's almost like a parallel existence. To answer your the main part of your question is also, it's a very big answer, because it's kind of it's a very funny thing. If you're in Japan and you're sitting in house of friends, or well, my spouse's home is where she grew up. Family houses tend to be intergenerational, so her mother lived in that house until she passed away, and now her daughter shares that house with us. And the television is on in the kitchen. The kitchen is usually the meeting ground of things. And you'll see people of all kinds of diverse genders and sexual whatever, appearing on the screen, and with zero issues about this whatsoever, and much more freely than you'll ever see on American television. And if you look at the surface of that, you figure, well, these cultures are much more free and open about all these kind of things. And yet, in Japan, marriage equality doesn't exist. There's all sorts of discriminatory practices. It's a society that is ancient and very rooted in its sense of putting people into boxes where they belong. So there are profound problems in that society that are just different than the problems we have here. I was pleased, when I get onto this subject, I was pleased that the recent Supreme Court nominee, when she was talking, she said something about accepting people of all sexual preferences. And the backlash I saw about the use of that antiquated term on major media really impressed me. I mean, it's been I grew up in a time when you would never, question something like that, and now that she ascribes it to a preference as opposed to an identity is actually, really, really vetted as it tells us we've come a very, very long way. But anyway, you asked a huge question. I've only begun to nick at the surface of that, and I'm no societal expert either. I happen to know Japan a little bit better than other Asian countries, but if you want to ask me about the culture of Fiji, I would suggest we just have to go there, sit on the beach, have Mai Tais, and find out. Okay, so
yeah.
Yeah.
So music is a really big part of your life. Do you have comfort music or your go-to type of music when you're like sad or stressed?
Music is not a big part of my life, young man. Music is my life. That's when I was in high school, we had a guidance counselor. These are the people you always avoid when you see them coming down the hall. You hide in your locker. You don't want to see the person, right? And this woman she asked me over and over in the weeks of my senior year in high school, aren't you going to audition someplace besides Juilliard? I said, well, my teacher says I'm good enough to get in, and that's not really the problem. I'll get in. I think you should have a backup school. You should think about the University of Maryland, maybe the community college or something. It's like, oh my God, this one's. Anyway, so to say, I tend to digress when I think of funny stories, as you can tell. I never chose music. Music chose me. When I was 3-4 years old, my mother noticed me standing in front of the radio in our living room, and she had it turned onto a channel that always played classical music. She wanted my brother and me to have a cultural upbringing, which she had not had. And I think she was concerned we get a good education and have opportunities that she wasn't afforded. So she noticed I would stand in front of that radio at 4:30 every afternoon. I still remember at 4:30 was this show that would come on with the overture to Mozart's Marriage of Figaro. The music was like. This music still to this day, it's sort of like reverberates. I of course don't recall this, but I would stand in front of that radio and listen to that. So my older brother was already starting some piano lessons, and my mother asked the piano teacher to start teaching me. I was only 3 years old, and she refused. She said, no, I can't teach someone that young. But she begged, and I begged, and eventually came the very wonderful day that Miss Wolf, her name was, picked me up on my little arms, put me on her lap. I do remember this actually, and she opened my brother's piano book, and I could play all of his pieces, making him very upset. Goal achieved. You always want to show up your older siblings for sure. But she asked me, what did I want to be when I grew up? And I told her I want to be a piano player and a pig farmer. Now, I'm so lucky that I've achieved one of my goals in life, and I still have a few years left. You never know what may come of the agricultural part of my background. I still do like pigs very much, but in any case, I think most musicians, most professional musicians, and when you go to the Symphoria concert, you see a stage of them. Most of those people have very similar stories. You know, music is something that I think everyone knows what it is. Everyone listens to it to some degree, and it's a part of everyone's life to some extent, whether very small or very large. But professional musicians are, to a great extent, it's sort of like professional tennis players or something. You grab this when you're incredibly young, because you love it and you want to do it. And then the years of discipline are sort of balanced by the depth of the love that you feel for it. Ideally, there's of course many variations on this theme, but in any case, that's how the music all started for me. Now, I am surrounded all day long, whether it's my own practice room where I'm working or I'm at the university listening to young pianists in the college, and they're practicing their Bach and their Beethoven and their Mozart and their Chopin and their Dvorak and their Bartok and their, how many more composers can I name? Prokofiev and their Gershwin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if I actually feel like hearing even more music when I get home, which I usually don't, it will be jazz. I listen to jazz to relax. I do not, if I listen to, if you started to play the piano for me and you started playing some Bach, my brain would start processing. What's wrong with that bar? You need to make more crescendo there. You used the wrong finger on that note, et cetera. The critical, obnoxious mom in me will come out and start telling you everything you're doing wrong. So that's not very relaxing, obviously. So, how about yourself? Do you like, what kind of music do you like?
Well, interesting enough, I listen to a lot of K-pop. I'm very into a lot of music
Gangnam
like
Style?
that technically, yes, that was the first introduction to K-pop that I had.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. But I do listen to like a lot of BTS and a lot of Blackpink and a lot of like those really popular groups. So I usually listen to mostly that kind of stuff. I'm not really into a lot of Western music. It's just kind of not my thing.
That's really funny. I mean, the K-pop, I've seen it in Korea, of course, and it's popular in Japan. Also, Japanese people love K-pop. But I look, I have to plead guilty. I'm just a few years older than you, and pop music. I think my understanding of pop music ended somewhere around the years of Carole King and Gloria Estefan. But let's forget about that. That's ancient history by now. I do know Gangnam Style because it was so popular and so ridiculous. And
yes,
I tell you, I'm very, very fortunate that I have young piano students in the university. And by young, I mean a little bit older than you. They're usually in their late teens, early 20s. And some of them do help keep me from turning into a total fossil, because they'll show me on YouTube what they're listening to. One of my favorite students of all time was this Korean gal who adored, if you can believe it, disco music of the 1970s. And this was stuff that was big when I went to college, so we were watching the Tramps together and, Marvin Gaye and stuff like this. We had these big parties in the studio. She had all these moves, and I realized I had lived long enough for the things that I knew to be completely retro and therefore cool all over again. Now I have to go through a fallow period of another 20 years where it's not, and then it'll come back maybe just in time for me to die. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, I'm happy that I mentioned Gangnam Style. You knew what I was talking about. That's kind of old news by now, of course, but it's what can I say? My understanding though about young people in classical music is actually they do listen to a lot of it, but in a very different way than my generation used to. We used to go to the symphony concerts. We had subscription tickets, so. But you can listen in very small snippets on YouTube, movement at a time, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a much more patchwork approach to it. And I hope, I think your conductor here in Syracuse, he's a fabulous man, and you've got a great group here, this Symphoria. And you might want to check on YouTube and just listen to a few minutes of this and that. And I know I can't do the moves to the Bruckner 7th, but you might find something that's a little enjoyable there. What can I say? Anyway, so that's my long answer to your short question. Now, What's the next easy one? You asked easy questions. Yeah.
Let's do a quick response. You're driving in your car. What station is playing?
Trouble. I don't have a driver's license, so I can't drive my car. I got a driver's license when I was about 25 years old. On my way to the driving exam, I ran a red light. So that told me that I should not be allowed in a car. There's a famous movie actor named Clint Eastwood who said famously in a cops and robbers movie, he said a man has to know his limitations. Put it that way. Very good advice. There are things I can do, like play the piano and teach. There are things I can't do. I can't drive a car. So anyway, but driving my car, what would I listen to if I was driving a car? I would like to be wearing a satin chiffon mini skirt with a long powder pink scarf, Audrey Hepburn sunglasses, MG with the top down, and it's blasting Shirley Bassey singing "Gao Feng Ah," while I'm holding a cigarette in a holder and a martini in the other hand. I don't know which hand I'm driving the car with, but that's you asked. There's your answer. Okay, if I can drive, that's why I shouldn't be driving. All right.
So I've always been drawn to the ukulele myself, but for you, why the piano? Did it choose you, or did you choose it?
Well, we had the piano in my house because the piano was always an instrument that middle class folks would purchase as a kind of a home entertainment center of sorts. And my mom grew up in a house where she and her sister would gather around the instrument and somebody would play and the other folks would sing. And so, I mean, when I was a little kid, my brother and I would sing Christmas carols around the piano, like while my mother would play it. So that was like a home cozy instrument, and that was really the only instrument I knew until high school band. I played the flute a little bit. But you mentioned ukulele. I have 3 ukuleles myself. I traveled a lot to Hawaii, and a dear friend of mine is a champion hula dancer, if you can believe it or not. And I've gone to some fantastic Hawaiian concerts, mostly in Honolulu, but a few in Hilo as well. And I acquired a few. Ukuleles are very, very beautiful. I can play about 6 chords on the ukulele, pretty badly. I mean, there's no skill there whatsoever. But the one that I have that I'm most proud of, I had it signed by a very famous ukulele virtuoso. So very, very proud of that. I'm glad you. So do you know Jake Shimabukuro, for example? You must know that name, yes? Very famous Hawaiian ukulele virtuoso. So do you own a ukulele or one or two?
Yes, I do. I own 2, but I only usually ever play one of them.
I see. Very, very nice. And how many chords have you mastered? It's all about chord mastery. You know that, yes?
Oh, there's a lot.
The eyes getting really, really big. Yes, there are a lot. Well, okay. Do you know in excess of 20 or 25?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, then you're way above me. You're way ahead of me. So consider yourself blessed there, you know. So you have to learn, of course, you can do a lot of modern things in the ukulele, but you also have to do the old standards. I mean, you have to do Honolulu Baby, for example. And, I'm having a hard time thinking of Waikiki Beach right now. Somehow it's not popping to my mind. I'll think of some other numbers later. Where did you find it? Where did you fall in love with the ukulele?
So I actually was introduced to it through a school project that I had to do when I was younger. And I was just kind of drawn to it because I kind of have really small hands, so I can't hold a guitar. It was just like, oh, this fits in my hands. And I just kind of got attached to it really quickly.
And ukuleles are, well, they're masterpieces of workmanship, of course. Also, the way they're made is just, they're so beautiful.
Yes.
To look at, beautiful to hold. And do you carry it in a case to school just to show off?
No, I don't usually do a lot of music stuff
This
at
is a
school.
good opportunity there. You know, I once bought a billiard stick. I'm a terrible pool player, but I bought this billiard stick and a beautiful case for it, just so I could walk into a bar and people wouldn't challenge me. You know, you just like they clear out. I think you're a pro. You know,
Yeah,
a good fake out move. Okay. Good for you. Good for you. So, what's next on your bucket list there?
So I represent a group of friends who all come from the Q Center here in upstate New York. Did you have a Q Center-like space when you were growing up, and where did you find your support?
Boy, what a question! And if I, this is a role of my life that I have found increasingly precious to me. That I am really grateful that I lived long enough to embrace it, and really, really happy. I'm really happy to get to this particular question for you because in the world, in the America that I grew up in, there was no mention of these things at all. There was certainly no Q Center. Nobody would have ever even dreamed of such a thing. And one of the things that absolutely prevented me from ever mentioning to my own parents that I had a real, serious upset about gender, it was my conviction, and it was probably correct, that they would have taken me pretty quickly to a mental institution. And I do know people who were actually, this was done to them. And this certainly existed when I was a kid. Whenever I heard about gay people, and they weren't called gay, they were called much worse things than that, discussed in conversation, it was always derisively and shockingly. And I might also add that Baltimore in the 1960s was a profoundly racist place where the divisions of color were just enormous. So I mentioned it, but my main piano teacher, this Filipino man, was a rather dark-skinned Filipino fellow, and I've never forgotten this story. When I was about 8 years old, going to my piano lesson, and as we walked in the room, he asked my mother, he said, I really want to ask you a question. And he said to her, I drove down to South Carolina last weekend. I played a piano recital down there, and then I was driving back, and I stopped the car to get some gas. And he said, I went in the back to use the bathroom, and I saw there was two doors, and one said white and one said black. He said, and I looked at my hand, and I didn't know where to go. He asked my mother which door that he should use. So I felt like privileged to grow up in a milieu because of the music that was such a big part of my life. I could meet someone like this who lived in the Philippines and in France, and was much more cosmopolitan. And his take on this absurdity of American culture opened my eyes pretty early. So at your age, actually when I was exactly your age, I went to college. I left Baltimore and I went to New York. And when I went to New York City, in the confines of the Juilliard School, I met a lot of other musicians for the first time in my life, and some of them were gay and out, some of them were gay and closeted. But I quickly figured out that I wasn't really gay either, that I didn't understand who I was or what I was. And in the pre-internet age, finding basic information about what it means to be transgender was nearly impossible. So I have a great sympathy for young people, particularly in smaller places of our country, where they're either that access isn't so easy to get to, or they're prohibited from getting that access, or prevented, or discriminated against, or all the rest of it. I would give everything in the world to be able to morph myself back in time and grow up in a time when there could be a Q Center, or support, or books, or understanding about what it means to be transgender. And just as I said to you before about, when you're a musician, you're born and you know it. When you're trans, you're born and you know it. And I knew I was female, and I went to school, and everything was pretty fine, for me in my life until I was about 6 years old, and I was taken to school. And then they put me on the boys' side of the room. They actually separated the room by gender. And I tried to tell the teacher I was on the wrong side. And, well, what can I say? When I was about 8 years old, my grandmother, who was a very accomplished seamstress with a sewing machine. Have you ever seen one of those, young men? I'm sorry, when I talk about typewriters, record players, these kind of things. She made me the most fantastic present imaginable. She knew I loved Mozart and the music of Mozart. She sewed me a deep purple velour Mozart coat with a kind of Mozartian collar shirt or blouse to go with it. Lots of lace coming out. I loved this thing. I wore it on Easter Sunday, on special occasions to church. My parents would let me wear it. So one day I got myself dressed to go to school. I was in third grade, and my mother was doing something other than helping me get dressed. So I put on my favorite Mozart shirt. I went to school. When I was sent home around 2 o'clock in the afternoon with a bloody nose, blood all over the shirt because the boys beat me up for wearing this, the principal of the school called my mother. And of course, of course, he told my mother that I would be suspended or possibly expelled if I ever came to school wearing women's clothing again. So this is the kind of story I was about to say a story I like to share. No, I don't like to share. I don't see your eyes getting used, like describing life in Gulag, Russia, or something like that. But I think young people should know that it's well within easy reach of my memory and my generation of such times when the treatment of LGBT folks was so barbaric. It's pretty hard to imagine today. We've all come a long, long way. When I started to transition at the age of 36, 37, there was a New York center, LGBT center in Greenwich Village, and that was the first place that I got some real support, helpful counseling of a very decent sort. And that whole situation has changed so dramatically just in the last 2 decades. I've just been thrilled to see it. Of course, a large part of this is because of the internet. And in my own life, in the mid-1990s, I guess, the first time I got an iMac, big, huge things, and I discovered the wonder of chat rooms, I suddenly discovered there was a lot more people like me than I really actually had ever known before. And there's power in knowledge and power in numbers, which is a very comforting thing. So I'm glad you have this Q Center in Syracuse. Hillary, besides counseling, what are some of the services that the center offers to the young people?
Sure. So we actually don't offer counseling, but we do care management, which provides like sort of connection to affirming resources. So we're kind of like, we do the really hard work of finding those people. And so I'm actually not located in Syracuse, so we cover Syracuse. We have a physical center there. But I am in like northern New York, like close to Canada. And so is Alex. So even more rural than Syracuse. So there's not a whole lot going on up here when it comes to support. Like the Q Center is the only place that offers support. So we have support groups. We have we have groups for parents of transgender youth. So we provide sort of wraparound services. We assist with legal name and gender marker change. If someone is looking for hormones or surgery, we can connect them to that. And we go into schools and help with gender and sexuality alliance clubs. And we provide education around understanding sexuality and gender identity. We provide that training for pretty much anyone that wants it. So schools, mental health providers, social agencies, like I said, anyone that wants it. So I would say that there's a difference between like northern New York and central New York where Syracuse is, and that access is much easier. Whereas, as you mentioned, some places being inaccessible, the North Country is very much like that. So unfortunately, with pandemic circumstances, that in-person piece is sort of gone. So we've been able to meet virtually and sort of bring kids from all 9 of our counties together in a virtual setting so they can really connect with other youth going through similar things, just maybe in different areas, which over the last 6 months has been really, really cool to see people sort of develop these relationships.
Yeah, that's a very, very wonderful thing. Yeah, this was my biggest barrier to self-understanding was just the lack of knowledge, the lack of resources. And I had no role models. I remember, I think it was in 1974, I would have been about 14. The newspaper had this picture of this tennis star named Renee Richards, which is one of the first people who really publicly transitioned after, the writer Jan Morris, I guess also. But I saw that, it just electrified me. I remember seeing that, and some part of my brain said, yeah, you can do that, that can be done, But it was so rare, it was so unusual, it was so out of the realm of anything people thought about that it was just a real barrier to my own, to any kind of ease in my own living. I mean, my life was, but to some extent, my life really became so very much about music because that was a very safe refuge for me. In the practice room, in the concert hall, I could do something that was, in a sense, it's outside of my body. It doesn't relate to how I feel. But of course, before the concert and after the concert, and my feeling in my mid-30s was such depression, such misery, that I felt like I was an actor who never got off the stage. I was just always acting some funny role. It's kind of a terrible thing. So to some extent, I mean, that I now, when I travel to concerts or when the pandemic ends and I'll start traveling again for concerts, I find more and more I am asked to speak to colleges or speak to young people or, whatever. And I'm really, really eager to do that because I think it would have made such a huge difference in my own life if I had known someone like that. If there was somebody in the community or someone nearby who just said, yeah, I'm trans, let me talk to you about what that's all about. We had no role models, just none, zero, and I think it was very much like that for gay folks in the decades and generations before us. There was just very little sense of a larger community. So the community is so important. And you folks making this available to all the young people with the use of the Zoom and the technology, that's a terrific thing. It's a fantastic thing. So Alex, in terms of the center, I mean, you've been to the physical center, or you're connected online, and what kind of things do you get out of that? I'm curious.
So I've been going mostly online. I actually went there today because they've actually started doing like a drop-in time, which is really nice. Mm-hmm. But it's just a really nice kind of situation to like be able to like take an hour and talk to people who like understand like what you're going through and like how it affects different people's lives. And it's something that I look forward to every week. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I'm so excited for group, and I'm really upset when I miss it. So yeah. Connection is terribly important.
I have to say I was really thrilled in the last year that I was contacted by my old alma mater, by Juilliard, and then also by the Royal College in London, asking if I would be a mentor to some trans students who were going there. And I thought, wow, the world really has changed. I mean, that schools and universities will try to make some arrangements so that students can get their education and feel comfortable and be connected, in otherwise difficult circumstances. That's a very nice thing. So hopefully that'll, happen again when we come out of the pandemic. We're all sort of, I don't know about you guys, I'm kind of waiting with bated breath for the winter and hoping that spring will bring all kinds of good things, including a nice vaccine and, and maybe a little bit more normality to life. The personal connection is so necessary for us all, isn't it?
So Alex, why don't you ask one final question to Sara as we wrap up?
So, do you have any advice for youth still trying to find their voice or live their truth?
You have peppered me with the easiest damn questions today, I'll tell you. Being loaded for action today. Well, you put me you kind of put me on the spot, because that's a very important question as well. Do I have advice, something like that, because you feel the weight of your answer, like people are depending on what you say. Shakespeare, the great playwright, put it best. He said, this above all, to thine own self be true. I could never put it more eloquently. I think we do, let's start from the negative aspect. We read so many terrible stories of non-acceptance or of problems that divergent folks have, let's say something like that. And the simple fact is that when we embrace ourselves, when we are true to ourselves, when we present ourselves as who we are and who we love ourselves to be, we do everyone a great, great service, because the honesty and integrity of our human relations forms the kind of world that we have. And it seems to me that all of the problems that pepper our world is when people are not being open, not being honest, and not being accepting of each other. There's this tremendous variety to life, and would you want to live in a world that only had beef and fish for dinner? Oh, I've just mentioned your two least favorite dishes, probably.
I don't really like fish, but
Okay.
beef is okay, I guess.
Okay, all right, yeah. Well, I mean, but it's, what I'm getting at is, if there's only the same thing on the menu every day, what kind of a world would that be? No, I think we live in a world with fantastic cultures and languages and music and people of every considerable stripe, color, and divergence, and what a wonderful, beautiful world it is if we just live to celebrate it and dance about it and sing to it. That's a very, very wonderful thing. So, Alex, I'm really thrilled to meet you. I want to steal that fantastic shirt off your back. I love that shirt. And it's an honor to meet you, a pleasure, and I'm really touched that I was asked to participate in this with you for the Q Center, and very much looking forward to my trip to Syracuse. So I hope that we'll meet again in person, with or without music. And I tell you what, you can take me for a spin in the car, but only if you're wearing Audrey Hepburn glasses, the scarf, all right, martini, cigar, the whole deal, all right?
Alex, you better be working on your driving, because we know Sarah won't be
I know.
driving.
My driving test is in November, or my permit test is in November, so I'm very nervous.
Well, good luck. And
don't run a red light on your way to the test.
Yeah.
Alex, Sarah, and Hillary, we are so grateful to all of you for being so generous with your time and for collaborating with Symphoria and really making Sarah's expertise and her wisdom available to so many people so that they can hear this wonderful message of acceptance and love and being who you are, because that's what this is all about. That's what the world is about. So thank you everyone who joined us, for all of the Q Center peeps who are watching this. Thank you for being here, and we are excited to share this concert with you. We cannot wait. So everyone who's watching, thank you, and let's get to the show.